The Presidential Committee on Fiscal and Tax Reforms, chaired by Mr. Taiwo Oyedele, recently proposed a reduction of multiple taxes paid to various levels of government to a single digit of taxes. This reduction is to help lower tax burdens placed on individuals, households, and businesses. There's a lot happening in that space, and to give us updates on this Democracy Day of the activities and workings of this committee, I'm being joined by no other person but the chairman of the committee himself, the Presidential Committee on Fiscal Policy and Tax Reforms, Mr. Taiwo Oyedele. Good afternoon, Mr. Oyedele. It's good to have you on the program.
Good afternoon, Tolu. Good to be on your program.
Yes, it's been quite a while, so I think I'd like to start this way. What's been happening? A lot we've heard about, a lot of developments in that space, but bring us up to speed with what you think we all need to know about the workings of the committee at this time before we get into some specifics.
Yeah, thank you very much, and happy Democracy Day to our viewers. Indeed, a lot of work has been going on with the Presidential Fiscal Policy and Tax Committee for about 9-10 months now. The work that we're given to do for our country has three broad pillars. One is fiscal governance around our finances as a country, including tax and non-tax revenue, our spending, as well as borrowing, policy coordination, and also ensuring that fiscal thresholds as contained in the various laws are indeed appropriate and respected. The second pillar of our work is revenue transformation. Again, this has a component to do with tax, but this is not about taxing people more. It's actually about relieving so many low-income earners and small businesses of the tax burden they have to contend with, and getting the people at the top of society to pay a little bit more. But we also have the component of revenue transformation that is focusing on government asset optimization, focusing on government-owned enterprises such as the NNPC, as well as other mineral resources, particularly solid minerals. And then the third pillar of our work is on economic growth facilitation and competitiveness for our country, where we can now look at what are those impediments to trade, to businesses, prosperity of individuals, businesses thriving, and the economy doing well generally. What are those impediments that we need to remove? What are those policies that we need to introduce so that overall our economy is really what we can all be proud of? So this work we're doing is divided into three phases. Phase one is on quick wins, and that report was submitted to Mr. President in October 2023. It has over 20 recommendations. Some of them have been fully implemented. Quite a number of them are still being implemented at different stages of implementation as we speak. The second phase of our work is a critical reform phase. That's the phase when we are rewriting all the tax laws. We are proposing amendments to other fiscal law like Fiscal Responsibility Act. We're also recommending changes to the Constitution to make sure that the reforms we are trying to introduce are sustained and institutionalized. And also, we have a new national fiscal policy that we have drafted, which is going to be signed in the next couple of weeks. So this major work that we are just wrapping up now is a critical phase of our assignment. The last phase is where we have just moved into, and that is the implementation and change management phase, where you make sure that you're able to dot all the I's, cross the T's, get the law signed, executive orders introduced, regulations signed, and then the implementation of those, because it's not just sufficient to introduce new policies, you also must ensure that they are implemented, and we are also going to be monitoring the impacts that those implementations will have on the ordinary person on the street. So this is the where we are at the moment. We have a number of executive orders that are outstanding, not because nobody is doing anything about them. It's because the processes involved in getting those things to final stages need to be extensive, they need to be diligent, they need to be collaborative so that we carry people along. We've done extensive stakeholder engagement with the private sector, government institutions, even Nigerians in the diaspora. So we think that we're making good progress. Although everybody, including myself, were in a hurry, I wish that some of these things have been, even implemented as of yesterday.
Interesting stuff. Well, there are some recommendations, like you said. One discussion that we've also heard of is the issue of VAT, recommending that food, education, medical services, and all of that could be 0% value added tax. This is one argument on one side. Maybe this can help address rising inflation and other economic issues that we face. I don't know, what your thoughts around that?
Yeah, so thank you for starting the conversation in the right way. This is the way we want people to discuss the reforms around VAT. So our proposals for VAT reform is first and foremost about how can we make the business environment more conducive, more competitive, and how can we make goods and services that are mostly consumed by low-income earners and poor people to not carry the burden of VAT. So in that process, we identified some food items that should not carry VAT, still having some VAT on them. We identify things like education. We identify health. We also identify accommodation. We identify also transportation. So we've done the analysis, and about 82% of the items in the inflation basket, which we call the CPI basket, are items that we are proposing for the VAT on them to be reduced. And this 82% of the inflation basket account for about 100%, actually, of where more than half of our population spend their household income. So for them, with these reforms, they will see a decline or a reduction, if you like to call it that way, in the prices of those goods and services. But to be able to compensate to a certain extent for government loss of revenue, we need to also adjust the rate upwards on items that do not fall in these categories of essential consumption. In addition to that, for businesses, we are proposing that they are able to claim input VAT on all their services that they pay for, all their goods, as well as their investments in the form of assets, including, for example, building a factory. So today, if you build a factory in Nigeria, even though the VAT rate is lower than it is in Ghana, all things being equal, it will be cheaper for you to build it in Ghana than to build it in Nigeria, because in Ghana, you'll be able to claim all the input VAT on everything that you spent in setting up that factory. So we cannot be competitive if we continue with the status quo. We also have issues about states. Some states have other forms of consumption taxes. They are called consumption tax, entertainment tax, event center taxes. We've taken the view that it is not right and not appropriate for our country to have duplication of taxes in different forms. So we're also proposing that every state in Nigeria should let go of these other consumption taxes, and we just focus only on VAT. And as a reward or carrot for these negotiations, we're also proposing that states and local governments will share 90% rather than 85% of the VAT revenue, which means the federal government portion would effectively reduce from 15% today to about 10%. But overall, people will benefit. Small businesses will be exempted from having to charge VAT. And we think that this is in the right direction, both in terms of reducing inflation, making the environment easier for doing businesses, and in the medium to long term, improving our economy overall.
That's a good one, and thanks for that explanation. I also want to talk about the rich people. There's this argument that rich Nigerians don't pay tax, or they're not paying enough tax. and instead of taking more money from the informal sector. Now, what is the committee saying around this so that we can help balance this? Do we have data to also support this?
Yes, indeed. So we rely a lot on data for our work. We believe that if you don't use data and empirical evidence to develop policies, it doesn't matter how good your intentions are, you will never be able to achieve the outcomes that you so desperately need. So from the data that is available to us, it is indeed correct that the bulk of the tax revenue that government is generating today is coming from the lower cadre of society. People who are paying PAYE of 5,000 per month, 3,000, 10,000, because really they have no choice. Someone is deducting those taxes at source before paying them whatever net salary that they are able to get. Whereas around the world, what data also suggests to us is that the bulk of the revenue from taxes that government generates in countries where they're doing well tend to come from the top 5% of society. So if the top 5% of society is not showing up, then you have the outcome that we have in Nigeria today, where our tax to GDP ratio is one of the lowest in the world, and not even sufficient for us to meet our social needs as a people. So clearly, we need to do things differently. So our approach is to, again, start with data. Rather than going to people to ask them to tell us their income, we're developing a system where we will know people's income, whether they operate in the formal or in the informal sector, and then we'll be the one to tell them, this is what your income is. And therefore, these are the taxes you need to pay. After we have made sufficient and reasonable exemptions for low-income earners, we do believe that because of the level of multidimensional poverty in Nigeria, we think that the vast majority of our people should actually be legitimately exempted from paying income taxes just so they can at least keep body and soul together. So that is in a nutshell, that is the summary of what we have seen so far, and therefore the proposals that we have on the table regarding getting people to pay based on their ability to do so. And that will truly make our tax system to be progressive in terms of tax collection. But beyond tax collection, we also have a proposal as to how to make the spending to be progressive. And that is, for example, if you look at the total revenue you collect from a poor neighborhood, and you compare that with the amount of government spending in that neighborhood, government needs to be spending more than they are collecting from those places, which is not the case as of today. When you are not spending more in poor neighborhood than the taxes you collect from them, then your fiscal system is regressive. And we need to change that as well to be able to, improve the lives and livelihood of our people, and also provide the welfare that is required by the Constitution as the primary reason for the existence of government for our people.
Have there been challenges one way or the other in carrying out this workings of the committee? I will also ask that some policies of the central bank, which is also impacting this, a two-in-one question, impacting the financial space, say the CRR and all of this. Is there any way we can also get all of this to help us stabilize our economy one way or the other, grow the economy? What are your thoughts around this, Mr. Oyedele?
Yes, so there are a lot of challenges for a reform of this magnitude. I'm not aware of anything that has been done like this in Nigeria since our independence. So this is a lot. Although many people still just refer to the work we're doing as they refer to us as a tax committee, whereas tax itself is less than 20% of the work we're doing. But that's not a problem. The point is that what we are doing is so fundamental to the development of our economy, and it's expected to be transformative. So this is not celebrating incremental progress anymore. This is a transformation where you have a leap forward. you would imagine that there are people and interests who currently benefit from the status quo. And therefore, they will not be in favor of what we are trying to do because that would upset their own interests. But we are placing the national interest first. We are placing national interest next. And we are placing national interest always. So we believe that if Nigeria is working, then everybody will find a place under that working Nigeria that we can all be proud of. We have the collective will of the majority of Nigerians, the private sector, a lot of government institutions, the National Assembly, the state governors. Even we had a very good meeting with the finance commissioners from across Nigeria just yesterday. And of course, we have the support of Mr. President, Mr. Vice President. So we think that this scale of the support that we have, as well as our international partners, or people you can call the friends of Nigeria, whether it's the World Bank, the African Development Bank, the United Nations, the IMF. So we have all of these, and even local, civil society such as Budgets, Nigeria Economic Summit Group, are all on board. So we are confident that with this level of support, we'll be able to push through, even though it will be hard. So we're positive about getting the right outcomes at the end of the day. On the central bank's policies around, interest rates, exchange rates, CRR, I think the common saying out there is that the monetary authorities have been doing a lot, and the fiscal authorities need to also complement, what the monetary authorities are doing. Unfortunately, fiscal reforms are not as quick. You can't just, set up a meeting and then announce a new rate. So it takes time. It requires a lot of diligence, a lot of data, a lot of consultation. But we think we are getting towards the end of that whole process. And hopefully very soon, we begin to see the impact of these reforms. So one of our recommendations is that while the central bank is sterilizing deposits by way of cash reserve ratio, and they also have, that's 45%, and they also have liquidity ratio of about 30%, we're asking ourselves, is there a way that government, because government includes even the central bank, is there a way that government can have some arrangements where you have like development finance, and this is done everywhere in the world, where for those development finance, we can target manufacturers, we can target agri sector, we can target pharmaceutical. So those critical sectors of our economy that cannot afford to go and borrow at 35%, then we can now target them with lower interest rates so that while we are trying to fight inflation on one hand, we do not constrain our ability for productivity on the other hand. Otherwise, we're going to be creating more problems as we're trying to solve the existing ones. We do believe that it's not a binary choice between fighting inflation and growing the economy in an inclusive manner. We think that we are in a place today as a country where both objectives can be achieved at the same time. So we continue to work with the central bank about these our ideas. Of course, we all have to remember and recognize that the central bank is independent in their decision making. But because it's one economy, we're certainly then working together, and hopefully we get the outcome, like I said earlier on, that works for everyone.
Well, I must thank you so much, Mr. Taiwo Oyedele, who's the chairman of the Presidential Committee on Fiscal Policy and Tax Reforms. Thank you for spending your holiday with us. I know there's a lot of work going on there, so not really holiday, but thank you for your time. I really appreciate this.
Thank you for having me.
Well, interesting conversation there, looking at